You are listening to This is Oklahoma, hosted by Mike Hearn, telling stories of Oklahomans and those that have made it their home.
Before we get into today's episode, I want to tell you a little bit about our current sponsors, the Oklahoma Hall of Fame. As you well know, if you've been following This is Oklahoma, they've been a huge part of this podcast. So this podcast is presented by the Oklahoma Hall of Fame, telling Oklahoma's story through its people since 1927. For more information on the Hall of Fame, go to www.oklahomahof.com and follow them on Instagram for daily updates at OklahomaHOF. What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of This is Oklahoma. Mike Hearn here, your host, back with another episode up at I guess the Hardrock in Tulsa today. Gonna talk some football, which some of you will know that that's not exactly my specialty, but it is my guest specialty. My football is actual like football, not hand egg, which you guys play, but we'll go into that another time. My guest today is Kenyatta Wright, who played football at OSU, so as big OSU fans will know who you are, and born and raised in Oklahoma. But today we're going to talk about obviously your upbringing, getting into football, and then the reason that we're at the Hard Rock today for this event that you guys are doing. But before we do, the way we do this podcast, we set a little bit of context. Tell us a little bit about where you're born and raised.
Man, I grew up and was born actually in Fort Smith, Arkansas, but grew up in Vian, Oklahoma.
Okay.
It's our crown jewel there is Lake Tenkiller, and so I kind of grew up there and come from a farm family, that type of background, love the outdoors, and got a hold of football my 7th grade year, and just been a roller coaster after that.
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah. I mean, what's it like in Vian, Oklahoma growing up?
It was great, and I didn't know what I didn't know, you know what I mean, and you kind of didn't really understand the outside world. Just kind of knew that our community was geared around togetherness and helping our neighbor out and always working hard. But man, I loved my time there. It was obviously after I got out of there and left Oklahoma.
Yeah.
Didn't know what was on the other side of the fence for me, but it was a great time, but somehow you always find your way back home, and that's where I am now.
Yeah, no doubt. And that's, I mean, for me, right, I mean, I sound different. I'm from Wales, originally in the UK, but I mean, I love it here. And this is now my home, which my mum hates me saying that, she's like, home is always in Wales. It is, but I've been here 10 years now. I love the state, the people. It's just a special place, and I'm sure it's the same feeling for you when you're like, I gotta go home. But tell me about, so when you pick up a football, you realize that, wow, this is lights my fire. This is my new passion. And then you realize that you get good at it. You're playing high school football, and then where do you go from there? And then how do you get picked up to go to OSU?
Well, I really love baseball.
Okay.
I kind of liked football. I mean, I love baseball. I poured everything into that sport, and just football kind of was the thing you do as an athlete in our town. Everyone plays football at Vian, and it's the thing you do. And I've had 4 generations of Wrights playing in that town, and so it's just kind of like, okay, it's your time. It's your time to shine, but football really didn't probably grab me until I was a sophomore in college. I mean, I loved the game, but I liked the game, but I really didn't love it, but I hated to lose. So I'm going to try to do my best to be good at it. And just the camaraderie in the locker room, the friends that I grew up with, the friends off the field with the friends in the locker room. I mean, I loved all those things about the game of football. And then in college, I had a guy that actually 2 coaches, Coach Johnny Barr, who's retired now, Coach Rob Ryan, who's coach for the Baltimore Ravens now as a linebacker coach. Those dudes made me really fall in love with the game. And it transformed my mindset to know that, man, I could probably, make a career out of this,
Yeah.
And so I basically kind of dedicated myself to that, and it ended up well for me.
Yeah. How do you get, like, when you're raised in Vian, are you raised like as an OSU fan or an OU fan? Like, what was football like?
There was
why OSU?
lot of OU fans, and whenever you're, I'm like in my town, we call it the bottoms. I mean, we have 2, 6, and 8. You got 3 channels, you know what I mean? And so OU's always on one of those channels. So you kind of grow up an OSU fan because they're really, really doing well in football. They have done for a long time. So I grew up an OU fan, I actually was going to go to OU first, but there's a guy here today that's playing. That's my family member who was at Oklahoma State. He's one of the highest recruited guys in our state. He switched. He went different. He went to Oklahoma State, and so it was like, let's come build something different, And at the challenge of that time was to just really be different. And so that's kind of how I in a nutshell, went to Oklahoma State.
And then you show up in Stillwater.
Yeah, up in Stillwater. I'm a freshman, about 15 on the depth chart. I'm mad because I've started my whole life since T-ball at 3 years old. I've been a starter, never rode the bench or anything. And so you get there and I'm 15 and not really there's no light at the end of the tunnel for me. It's just like, I'm going to sit behind these guys. And, I tell the story all the time to my kids that I coach is like, man, I felt like pushing guys down the stairs and hoping that they get injured so I can get in the game, and it's just training camp. But by week 2, I was named the starter as a true freshman at Oklahoma State. Yeah. And that was tough in itself because you got other guys who've been there, they know the ropes, and I'm this young little guy from small town Oklahoma that these coaches are believing in, and I'm glad they believed in me because that changed my mentality.
Right, no doubt. Yeah, I mean, and growing up too, right? Like I said, you've been the starter the whole time, and then you get to OSU and you're like, oh, I'm not the only one, right? Like there's guys around me that are better that I've got to fight for and improve, and then like I said, you get that chance and you start and it takes off from there, right?
Oh, it definitely does, and it truly made me understand the value of hard work. And I didn't really feel like I was given anything in high school. I mean, you work for everything you get, no matter what. Just at that level, you're maybe just better than the guy around you, And in college, everybody's good, and it's just where's your advantage? And I found that my advantage was in studying film and recognizing what the opponents do and all those things that some guys take for granted, and still to this day as a volunteer coach at my high school in Vian, that's still my advantage, and that advantage will never go anywhere, but it takes work and it takes time and it takes a skill to understand the game at that level.
No doubt, yeah. And I mean, we'll get to this in a minute, but like I said, you got your back now, your high school, you're volunteering at your old high school, your sons are playing football, like at UCO and in Arkansas as well, like you're back in the mix now, right? And I'm sure that gets your juices flowing, and I'm sure there are days where you're like, I miss putting on the pads, but there are days where you're like, as a dad, right, and a family member and putting back to the community, you're like, I just love what I do now.
Oh yeah, and it's at that point to where you have these dreams as a young boy, and I was from, my parents split up or whatever, and kind of had that, separation of family dynamic, and now as a dad and as a husband, as a father to 2 girls as well, it's like, man, I dreamed about this time. You dream about this time in life, and we're living it. And I never thought I thought that my boys would get to go play college football somewhere, but at the end of the day, I didn't really realize how much it meant to me to be able to see them live out their dreams and the same dreams that I lived out as a young boy.
So at OSU, then you're starting, you get your 4-year starter at OSU. I mean, highlights. What are your personal highlights? And then what are the moments, if there was one, let's go that. What were your personal highlights? And then I'm asking you a question.
Well, one of the biggest moments is whenever we were playing Texas, and Texas had beat OSU really, really bad the year before, and they have a Heisman Trophy candidate. This guy is one of the best running backs in all time in college football, named Ricky Williams. I mean, he's a Heisman Trophy winner. He's one of the best running backs of all time, and he's coming in to your home town or your home stadium, and he's just come off of a game where he rushed for 250 yards against the number 3 defense in the country, and they're coming to play you, and it's like, for a linebacker, that is like one of the biggest challenges that you can have. And so it's like, how do we rally the troops? Right. And at that time on our defense, man, we had 7 guys that go to the NFL off that defense. We weren't just a slouch, what I mean? We weren't just a slouch defense, and we prided ourselves on being tough tough, mean, physical, and nobody finished a game that runs the football against us. That's just kind of how we prided ourselves in the way we play defense. And Rob Ryan was a big reason for that. But Ricky comes in our house, and I mean, he leaves with less than 50 yards, and he don't take his helmet off for the rest of the season. You know, he got embarrassed. I mean, it's one of those things. And I look at that as like something that is truly a defining moment, because not a lot of linebackers, not a lot of defenders ever get to face somebody at their prime in the best of their craft and really shut them out. Because he wasn't the only one on that team. They had some really good football players on offense, and I felt like that team we shut out pretty much and dominated the whole game. That was one of my most, it was a favorite memory besides beating OU. That was part of it, but they didn't have a Heisman Trophy winner like Ricky Williams.
You're right. That's awesome, because he's walking in here with his head the size of like, I'm going to destroy you guys.
I'm going to run all over these guys.
And
he said
trash
it, he said it.
And then like I said, he shut him out and sent him home with his tail between his legs. That's awesome.
That was a huge moment.
Any moments that you wish that if you had the chance, you could just one where you could take back?
I think the one moment in my career is that I was looked at as a leader a lot on our team because I called the defense. You know what I mean? But I was never really intentional with my teammates in certain areas of their life and certain areas of my life. I wasn't really intentional in things that you feel like, man, they do what they do. I'm not doing that. And it got to a point to where decisions were being made that affected all of us on a team. And whenever you lose guys or you lose some core people on your team in a big game, things like that, that was all reflective on leadership. And I felt like, I was a team captain or whatever, and felt like I was a leader of our defense and things like that. But I really, I look back and I was like, what if I was more intentional into developing a true off the field relationship with those guys, more than just football surface relationship? Because I think in college, that's what I had a lot. I mean, we all had kind of surface relationships. We just hung out, but we didn't really have an intentional relationship. And so that's why now I'm more intentional in the relationships that I have. There's some surface. We all have surface relationships, but the relationships that truly mean something and that you're going to develop over time, you have to have some intentionality about it. And that's where I think in sports, everyone just has a surface relationship. You see a Hall of Famer out here like Marcus Dupree, who has a 30 for 30, and we're out there joking with them. That's still a surface relationship, kind of, but we have the commonality of a locker room. Like we played, and I look up to guys like that or whatever. But at the end of the day, how can we be more intentional with our relationships? And that's where I'm at in life now. And I don't want to just say I heard and know and got Marcus Dupree's cell phone number. I want to have an intentional relationship of, it's a give take, and I think that's where that's the one thing that I regret in college.
That's a great point for people listening, regardless if they're on the field, in the office, anywhere. At work, right? You're right. Like, you meet people through journeys and jobs change, teams change. And you're right. Like, I'm sure we've all got people in our cell phone that, like, we should probably pick up the phone and call them now and reach out, say, hey, how are you doing? How's things? And touch base and build a real relationship, right? Not just a working relationship. So you make it to the show, you go to the NFL. What's that experience like?
Man, it was everything you expected, but none of what you knew. You know what I mean? I mean, my first game in Buffalo, I was just hoping to run out the tunnel and not trip and fall on the turf. You know what I mean? But it was very enjoyable. I've had some of the greatest coaches in the game coach me and be around me, and Wade Phillips, Ted Cottrell, all those guys that coached me in my way there on defense. I still do some of the things that they taught me. Rob Ryan, Buddy Ryan, all those guys that if you look up their names, they're the Mount Rushmore defense, and some of those things that they taught me today, I'm still teaching those techniques to kids who are in third grade in Vian. You know what I mean? And they apply. They apply. You know what I mean? And they don't really realize it. And kids ask me all the time, like, why do we do big bag drill so much? Well, because the first day I was in the NFL, the first drill I did was this bag drill. you know. So those things are things that I really cherish about the NFL.
Yeah. So you were at the Bills, and then Teddy takes you to the Jets, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Well, I mean, how different were they, the Bills and the Jets? Like, as just fan based, I mean, everything.
It was nuts.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, in Buffalo, I mean, you might have 10 media guys.
Right.
You know what I mean? I mean, and you're in New York, you got 150 people at your practice that are representatives of the New York media. You know what I mean? So it was kind of like, it was a showcase every week. And the difference was, though, too, also, is that I felt like Buffalo, our locker room was a little tighter. The Jets, are just so much going on all the time. And, you know, we had some big name guys. I played with some Hall of Famers, Kevin Mawai and Curtis Martin. I mean, Vinny Testaverde, all those guys are there. Marvin Jones, who's one of the greatest linebackers of all time, is like sitting right next to me. He's my tutor, basically. You know, I mean, playing with those guys, but Buffalo was what I really, really enjoyed, you know, and the fan bases there are nuts. I mean, when it's just 15 below and there's 7 feet of snow on the ground and half the stadium don't have shirts on, I mean, and you got beat the week before, I mean, and they're still there. I mean, I lived in Orchard Park, and on Tuesdays on my drive to practice, those guys were, I mean, there's 100 RVs outside waiting for the game on Tuesday.
It truly is a religion.
Yeah, it is. It is. And you can go to Walmart, you can go anywhere you want in New York, and they know you. You know, and they think you're their best friend. I mean, I seen Doug Flutie one time at Walmart, and there was a whole line of people that was running to go get Flutie fakes and Sharpies, hoping that he's signing. He had to run up out of there because it's like the whole Walmart was going nuts, you know?
I mean, I'm sure just the experience was just chaos, and in a time where, like, pre-social media, right, and you only have these stories, right, you can't, right, today you're like, oh, someone has a video of you in this store or whatever, or coming up to you getting a picture, and it's a total different time to grow up, but you build I think you probably built better memories and personal experiences, right, rather than people sticking a camera in your face, right, saying, can you take a picture, and you're like, dude, like, I don't even know who you are, right? But great experience, no doubt. And then, like you said, you get the feeling you got to come home. Tell me about that, coming back home. You know, you obviously got a family as well at this point, and you coming home, and, you know, the kids and high school football and stuff like that. Yeah,
it was year 7, being in New York, and I had got hurt, and just things were changing. Herm got fired. Our staff was getting changed. Ted had left and went to Minnesota, and I had got to the point to where it's like I was tired of the business side of it. I just wanted to play football and enjoy my family. And then, you know, my wife trying to take kids to school, and it was like the ideologies and the thought processes of those teachers was totally different than what we come from in the South. And it's like, man, all that stuff was bothering us as a family. And my kids loved Oklahoma. They loved their family, you know what I mean? And so I was at the point to where, man, is it all about money or getting the next contract, all of those type of things, where I still had one more year left on my deal, and I told my wife, I was like, I don't really think I want to play again. And she's like, you better make sure or whatever, and because she know how much I loved it, you know what I mean? And
well, it's been part of your life for so long. You haven't done anything else, right? It's just been football. Just
been football, and I was like, well, I think I'm at the point to where I just want to really enjoy life and not really life on my terms, because I was always having to be somewhere, be connected to something, and people say, well, that's what you live for. No, that's not what I live for. That's just what I did. You know, my passion was people, relationships, and my family. And so I made a decision to come home, and my agent still tried to say, hey, we got these teams calling you if you want to get whatever. I was like, I don't want to go bounce around. I don't want to be a journeyman football player. I was like, I don't have to prove anything to anyone, and I just want to come home and enjoy it, you know, and I did. I mean, I came home and started meeting coaches and volunteering at high school football football games and stuff like that. And I was able to coach 2 guys who played in the NFL from high school, from Oklahoma. And that's kind of like, that was like my legacy dream, to be able to have those guys like that.
Which is something now that you continue to do and will continue to do for a long time, right? That is your thing now, right? It's like, hey, I have this experience. I'm going to pass it on to the next one, family members and whoever, you know, kids coming up, right, that you've and successfully coached to the league, which is great for you, because, you know, having a playing legacy is great, but building a coaching legacy, like that's another thing, isn't it? It's a totally different skill to be able to coach.
Right, and that's where I feel like also is that that legacy is about human capital for me. It's how I invest in the people and how they invest in people. And so that human capital investment, that's the only investment I'm worried about now. Yeah. And that starts first with my family and then everyone outside that's not, not saying that there's surface relationship, but it's everyone I come in contact with. That's kind of that's the way I live now.
Right. Finishing up then, tell us about, obviously, the reason that we're here today, Oklahoma Former Players Chapter, and we're at the Kickoff Classic, at the Hardrock in Tulsa. So why are we here and what's the plan going forward with this?
This is our biggest fundraiser, the Oklahoma Former Players. This is our biggest fundraiser, and our money goes back 100% of it goes back to athletic programs. We go meet needs. People need money. I mean, COVID has stricken a lot of public schools. So we provide travel, food, equipment. There's a lot of schools that can't get jerseys, that can't buy them, can't afford them. Yeah. So we try to make those ends meet for athletes, because we all know as former players that without football, a lot of us wouldn't have the dreams and the journey that we have today. Right. And we feel that football is a tool that we can use to help the next generation of athletes and people and young men to grow up, and not all of them are going to make it to the NFL, but also at that time just giving them a chance to play. Yeah. And that's what we want to do, and that's where our money goes to. And it's not like, you're paying a whole bunch of NFL players. All this money is going directly to the schools in Oklahoma.
And back to the point you made at the start of the podcast, which is the reason that you kind of fell in love with baseball and football, is that feeling of camaraderie. You're making friends on and off the field. You guys stick together the whole time. And for a lot of people, sport is their way out. Sport is their release, right? If they don't have a sport, then they're in a different crowd, right? And who knows what path of life that takes, especially in some of these small towns. I have a friend of mine who works in Wewoka, and he's a coach there, and he has a facility dedicated to changing kids' lives and doing the same stuff, right? And it's the passion that comes from yourself and other players and people like that want to make a change, leave a legacy, and give these kids a chance. Because of if they can't afford jerseys. So something simple as that, right? Like, well, we'll take care of it, equipment or whatever it is. Like, just get you on the field, just get you together and building relationships from a young age with all the friends you have around you. And there's something about bonding over physical work, right? Physical experience, running around, working hard, whatever it is, with other teammates, isn't it?
Right.
It's totally experience.
That attachment can't be replaced in anything. I mean, it's the locker room. Yeah. And I value the locker room, like I talked about earlier. If I could be a little bit more intentional when I was a college player. So now I get to share about the intentionality of the locker room to the next generation of athletes, to let them know, like, that relationship can carry you, or it can carry you up or carry you down. Yeah. And that's where I feel like the NFLPA and the Oklahoma chapter, we want to make sure that every athlete that plays the game that we played is carrying somebody up.
Yeah. And to one of the points earlier was like, it's the NFL is doing such a great job, right? And it's you and right. It's you're a player and what else are you doing, right?
Athlete and
yeah.
So and that's great. And that's like today. All these guys that are here today are athlete and they're community MVPs, because the money that we raise today is going directly back into communities in Oklahoma to help the athletes and the school systems that don't have or that need, and we're going to try to pull as many resources as we can together to help every school in this state.
Awesome. For people listening, then, what how do they get involved? How can they sign up and play in this tournament next year, maybe, or other events?
Yeah, this tournament is called the Kickoff Classic. We used to have a gala attached to it, but with COVID, we decided not to do that. They can go to Oklahoma Pro Players, and we have donation links, or they can contact me on any social media, and I can give them a way that they can donate and with their tax deduction. And we're a 501c3, so they can obviously get a tax deduction if you need that. But we align ourselves with the Ronald McDonald House as well. We didn't get to visit there either because of COVID, but we're going to try to meet meet the needs of the communities that our 200 plus players live in.
Yeah, no doubt. For people listening, I'll post those links in the description. You can go straight to that. And I mean, definitely reach out. Definitely, if you feel the need or feel led to help out and have kids in football, or even if, like you've been listening to this podcast and you just, anything that Kenyatta said has touched base, and even if it's just around coaching, reach out. There's plenty of information around coaching, leading kids, boys and girls, whoever it is. It doesn't have to just be football, just coaching in general. Reach out. But Kenyatta, thanks so much for having me. Thanks so much for coming on the podcast. Really appreciate your time. And for everyone listening, we'll catch you next episode. Cheers.
Hey, appreciate you.
This podcast is presented by the Oklahoma Hall of Fame, telling Oklahoma's story through its people since 1927. For more information on the Hall of Fame, go to www.oklahomahof.com and follow them on Instagram for daily updates at oklahomahof.
Thank you for listening. We are inspired by those around us and hope that you are too. Make sure you subscribe to this podcast on your favorite podcast platform and leave us a review so we can keep telling your stories. For more great Oklahoma content, follow This Is Oklahoma on Facebook and Instagram.